Hey everybody, welcome to Bacon and Coffee. Got a great show this morning, but before we get started, I'm going to do our 30-second intro. You ready? All right, now for a little digital caffeine and bacon. Everybody, welcome to Bacon and Coffee Saturday morning. Today, I've got an incredible guest. His name is Bob Schiers. Now, Bob, you and I do this kind of goofy thing. I wouldn't even call it goofy. I think it's a wonderful thing, but it's called Pay It Forward Tuesdays. And actually, I had Chuck and Adam on like one of my early shows. And so why don't you describe what Pay It Forward Tuesday means to you?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Pay It Forward has been a part of my life for the better part of 40, 50 years. People have done things for me that I've then since tried to replicate or pay forward over my lifetime. It's giving people a hand up, just supporting them in ways that they may not expect, giving them a little break, an inside, angle on something. Or just supporting or providing them with things that they wouldn't otherwise have. And I've had so many cases of that. So it's just become part of who I am and paying it forward to others. And our initiative, the Pay It Forward Tuesdays, it's just a remarkable way to do that. And then equally important, in addition to helping people, is amplifying that so others step forward and do more good. So, that's the cool part, I think, about Pay It Forward Tuesdays, with Chuck and Adam and you and Jennifer and everybody. It's just, it's been such a great experience, and I am better for it. I mean, just in the past year, the folks I've come in contact with and provided counseling and support, I mean, it just makes me better because I learn from them. I'm an old dog learning new tricks every day.
Woof, baby, woof.
Woof, that's it. Yeah.
I think the coolest thing about it is you got a bunch of people who have skill sets that kind of come in and basically listen and then advise and kind of give perspective to people that have no concept of what's going on. More often than not, they're kind of, they're starting out, they're bootstrapping. They're trying to figure out, well, do I go this way? And I think one of the biggest things about today, media, we'll talk about, the big thing, so you guys know, Bob is into PR. We're going to dig into that. But I wanted to start with this because I think it's emblematic about what's happening online is, I was working on this. I don't know if you've ever seen this video or not, but it's basically, it's a kind of like a cage fight, but there's a bunch of people standing around, and there's one guy who is real skinny, and he's dancing and he's jumping and he's doing flips and all this other stuff, right? And he's just doing this, and then they start the fight, and he's dancing and jumping and doing these flips, and he basically flips into the guy one punch and he's out, and it's like, to me, social media, online marketing, all this stuff is jumping and flipping and making noise and doing all this other stuff. And the other guy just like one punch lands it,
Yeah.
And
you
so
have to get above all that, Yeah.
Right. And that's essentially what, I feel like that a lot of this stuff is. So I think Pay It Forward Tuesday, and just the Pay It Forward initiative and the kind of things that we're doing is to help people focus on, avoiding the bright, shiny object syndrome. That to me is really the key. So let's start out. We're going to kind of dig back into that a little bit, the B sauce, but let's learn about you, talk about your career in PR. Tell us about your agency. Tell me what those 5 letters mean, because I have no idea. I've got actually, if I go to my banners here, let me put that up. If I put this up, this is your company name. I have no idea what those 5 letters stand for. So
sure. Yeah. It's funny. I started my company in 1987. So we're 30 plus years, in the making. And I didn't want to be pretentious. I didn't know what to call my company. They're my initials, Robert Albert Schiers. So
Oh, that's simple enough.
Yeah, very simple and easy to remember. A lot of people say Rasper, but they're actually my initials. And I started that. I was my career in PR started, and actually earlier I was in journalism, and slugging away, working at various newspapers, Philadelphia Inquirer, the Bulletin, way before that its demise, and it's like a lifetime ago. And I ran into a guy I used to work with. I hadn't seen him in years, another journalist. And I was covering a football game. And I was, hey, man, how you been? And all this stuff. Yeah, great. I said, what are you up to? He said, I got into PR. And I'm PO. And he's like, PR, public relations. And I'm like, really? He goes, man, he said, it's sort of the flip side of what we do. We pursue, news. People came to us as news people. And he goes, I'm now the person pursuing those news people. So I did some quick research, learned about it, went back to school. Didn't get a degree in public relations, but learned all about it, took some courses. And the thing that triggered it was, he said, and man, the pay is much better.
Yeah.
It's a noble cause, but if you're in journalism, and especially in newspapers today, unless you're at the top tier, and even then the potential there is slipping. So, because of technology and change.
Right.
So I started a PR agency in '87, but what I did was got into PR and became 7-Eleven's PR manager for what was called then the Mid-Atlantic Division, then the Northeast Division. And in 1987, 7-Eleven went through an LBO, a leverage buyout. And overnight, myself and many colleagues found themselves unemployed. And I'm like, oh, man, child on the way. What do you do? And so I thought, do I start an agency? Do I go to the corporate side? And after a very frustrating crazy job search, I had a Michael Douglas falling down moment, where I lost it. Not proud of it, but it's just one of those things. And I went home, and you see the void behind me. It's being reframed because we redid our office. I have a sheet of paper that, I did the pros and cons of, do I start a company, join an agency? And it was after a really bad interview situation. And I crumbled that up. I was so frustrated. I was shaking. What do I do? Threw it in my wastebasket. The next morning I got up and said, I've got to do something. And I pulled that out of the trash and was going to rework it. And I noticed, without even realizing it, the last thing I wrote on that piece of paper, and that's why it's framed and will be put back up, is no one's coming to the rescue. And I said, you know what? I can't depend on others for my job, my livelihood. And I started my own agency, and I've never looked back. And so, 33 years ago, I guess, within a year or so. And then 6 years ago, I started with a dear friend and colleague, Susan Hamburg, down in Florida, Orlando, Florida. We started a new PR network. It quickly went international. Ironically, the name of the company is Unified Strategies Public Relations Network, USPR, and then we went international. So our international members sometimes, like, the language barriers, and like, why is it United States PR? No, read a little closer. It's Unified Strategies. So had we even realized it going there. But we talked about change and things over the years, and it's a constant, right? Like in life and in business. And so I'm a boutique size agency, and so I have big clients, but a small staff, and they're national and some international. So I've always needed a network. I've been a member of a network, but then Susan and I looked at a better business model. All the networks I've been in the past were almost like chambers of commerce. You couldn't advertise. You couldn't get the work as the name of the company. Your members could, and like a chamber. And it was nonprofit. We built a for-profit corporation. Members are all independent, independently owned members, but we actually, as a company, Unified Strategies, have clients of our own. And so then we share that work with members. And, my agency, for example, like if Duracell said, hey, we've got a 20 market launch, I don't have to scramble and find 20 people in 20 different markets. they're already members. We've gone through the vetting process. In many cases, they're colleagues that we've worked with for years.
Mm-hmm.
Cabot Creamery in Vermont, not to plug anybody, but, if they're doing something like a community tour every single day across the US or up the East Coast, community-based events,
Mm-hmm.
all I do is go to my network. Here's a one sheet, type it in, budget, expectations, scope of work. Are you in? 99% of the time, people are in. Sometimes somebody will have a bandwidth issue, or like with Lockheed Martin, no particular expertise in aerospace or something.
Mm-hmm.
So, it makes my life so much easier. And, with technology now, and we've all learned through the pandemic how powerful that can be, from working from home, virtual officing and things. I don't know. I'm really curious to see where things go in the PR world. A lot of the majors, the Hill and Knowltons and all these big companies with thousands of employees, office space to the tune of millions of dollars a year. They were very successful over the past, 16 months. What happens now? So that's another change.
Right.
So it's interesting.
Well, as you said, the only one of my favorite memes that I put up is a dryer. Normal is just a setting on a dryer, and
Right.
in this business, I mean, you talk about change in your world. When I started out, there was no internet. And so marketing had to evolve with the internet, and now everything is internet based. There's still clients that we do print for, but the amount of that is way down, and everybody wants to be found on Google, even though that's not always the best strategy, but it's what they know. So in your world, I mean, you talk about, journalism. So in my eyes, and tell me if I've got this straightforward, what PR really is basically it's not advertising, it's news for agencies.
Right.
Or it's news for companies. So what you're trying to do is kind of ride the tide of the news circle, give people who are looking for angles or ideas in creating content. It could be, videos, it could be commercials, it could be news stories. It could be expose. It could be a whole bunch of different things. It's not
Right.
just, you send out a press release and somebody gets interviewed in the New York Times. That's not the way it works, right? It's much broader than that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of take the profession public relations
Mm-hmm.
and I extend that out to its public relationships,
Mm-hmm.
and it's interesting. I ask people what they know about, for example, in our Pay It Forward, where we're helping people, and a lot of these folks are startups.
Mm-hmm.
What do you know the difference between PR and advertising and marketing and all that? And, public relations, to me, you have three types of public relations. You have good, bad, and none. And believe it or not, none is worse than bad, because you can always flip a bad.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have no PR, if people don't know who you are, you're silent, you're non-existent, you're dead in the water. So, a crisis can be a good thing on the back end, certainly
Mm-hmm.
not ever on the front end. You don't want to have to deal with a crisis, but for anybody, a crisis is not a question of if, but when.
Right.
So it's all about relationships. I have a module about media relations, and you talk about the friendships that may develop on a personal level with journalists, reporters, anchors, assignment editors. And you can have those, but man, there's a solid wall there. You can't go beyond that friendship versus the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a fine balance, but I think it's pretty common knowledge. If you do have those types of friendships, and I don't want to out anybody, that are friends of mine, say in the media, in major markets, it does give you a little bit of an edge, but they're professional enough to know if it's news, it's news. If it's not, thanks, but you get that chance maybe a little more with that kind of access of developing relationships over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't be fake. They have to be genuine,
Right.
And, so that's the cool part about public relationships. It's a fine line, but I think it makes a difference. So and when I say relationships, they can even be that this is so cool. because of the type of access, you can become friends in a professional sense with so many more people, especially beyond your market or scope, your geographic scope of where you're based, through social media.
Mm-hmm.
And I've become top fans just by following and interacting with countless journalists. And then, if you float something by them, and that's the key. The trick in my mind is you need to be sure it's not gratuitous. It's not self-serving for you or your client to get something out there. And again, you've got that little bit of an edge versus someone that just cold calls, sends out an email or, a blast or whatever, or, a blast news release. So there's that, distinction. So that's taking that relations to relationship level, makes a difference.
And it really does make a difference. And I think that was kind of, that's the cornerstone of, I like to always say, BI and AI. It's before internet, after internet, and artificial intelligence and all these other things that are coming out. I mean, you can, in the world of marketing and sales, there are two different ways of looking at things. Some people subscribe to, get connected with as many people as you can and spam them. And I'm of the mindset of, no, don't do that. Find a core of people that like and trust that can expand your network out, and I call it a tribe mentality. So you build a tribe of people who know, like, and trust you, and know you aren't going to compromise that relationship. You're not going to compromise your friendship. You're not going to sell them out or step on their toes or run them over with the bus forward and backwards,
exactly.
That kind of stuff. And then from there, they will introduce you to other people, and it builds credibility to those people. And then you can get out to that. I always say it's 150, 1,500, and 15,000. Everybody starts with the 15,000, spams everybody, and hope they can get down to that 150. But it's a long it's a long road to get to that place. And that's what social media does. And I think one of the differences of what you're talking about is you started out in the age when that stuff didn't exist and you couldn't just automate everything. You had to get on the phone. You couldn't even send emails when you started. I mean, so it was all about going to people's offices, getting on the phone. And that old style of stuff does not necessarily mean it's bad,
Yeah. It's, I've been blessed to have maintained relationships for 30 years.
Oh, yeah.
And, I'm on the tail end of my career. I'm in my mid 60s, have a great staff, and hopefully this whole thing will continue for many years, and our network as well. But, you carry those relationships. And what I'm seeing now, interestingly, is many of the anchors, many of the reporters, assignment editors have, for lack of better term, aged out. They're retiring.
Right.
And so, you have to then rebuild relationships. And they've been good with, I'm handing off to so-and-so, but it's tricky. You get towards the back end of things and you look back and you see what you've built. And it's funny. I drag this out because I mentioned to you, talking about change. And this is one of my favorite T-shirts. It's just a saying. It's, if I may.
Sure, go ahead. I do.
Yeah, do you know what that says?
Yeah, intelligence is the ability to adapt to change.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's just that. I think that's Albert Einstein or Stephen Hawking did a play on it and stuff. And you have to change. And you have to change if you want to survive. That means you have to adapt.
Right.
And
okay, so now I have to interject my 3 change jokes. Okay. Because I mean, you mentioned change. I have to do this.
Yeah, I brought it up.
Okay, you ready? How many babies does it take to change a light bulb?
Got me.
None. They neither have the physical ability nor cognitive skills to perform such a task. How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb?
1.
Right. And you know why?
What?
Because the light bulb has to want to change. And the final one comes from New York, because I grew up in New York and you're on the East Coast, so this one is like, how many New Yorkers does it take to screw in a light bulb?
Screw in a light bulb. No idea.
What the heck do you care? Right?
Why does it even matter? Right?
Right. Why is it matter? What's the matter, you? You know, it's like, you were talking about my cousin Vinny. The youths don't care about this stuff, right? They don't.
Yep.
The youths don't understand the PR. It's like it's about relationship. They just want to get on the text and do that kind of stuff. And so that brings us to the old way of doing PR used to be, you'd literally mail out letters. I mean, you would mail out letters. It would take weeks. Now stuff happens so fast. And we were chatting beforehand. And I said, man, if you had right now, and this kind of dating this, if you're watching it live, but a building collapse in Florida, if you have something about building safety, about what to do in an emergency, about anything that relates to that, it can almost sound like PR is taking advantage of a situation, but it's really not. It's creating heightened awareness about a situation, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So it's interesting. Over the years, part of my success with my agency has been getting clients to understand what that media relationship is, and then I call it prepositioning. We preposition clients to be what I call resident experts. So I don't happen to have a structural engineering client, but if I did, I would have them as a go-to source in most major newsrooms around the country.
Sure.
And we've done that with great success, so that when things like coronavirus came up, clients from Pfizer, boom, they're resident experts. They're talking about the pharmaceutical side of things and development and all that. So, it's prepositioning is a great way to look at gaining, business when the need is there, because it always goes back to the need. Selfishly, whenever you do something, I think if you ask yourself, what's in it for me? That's an inherent selfish one. But then you flip that to what's in it for my client,
right?
What's in it for the news organization? And in it for the news organization is always, it's got to be relevant to the audience or readers. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I say in my speeches, I have these things called Basilicisms, and I say, there people listen to two different radio stations, WIA AM and WIA FM, and of course we know AM is low on the dial, low res, and all that stuff, and FM is high quality. And WII AM is where most people broadcast on social media is what is interesting about me. And WII FM is what's in it for me. So in other words, the focus is more, what's in it for the newsroom or the newspaper and stuff like that. And so with that concept, let's talk about, kind of the differences before and the differences now. I mean, obviously there's a lot more noise now. And there's a ton of people, it's funny because PR is it's again, like you said, it's more about the relationship than getting the content out there in a lot of ways. But again, you're still competing against that other noise. If somebody pops something up, it's like, I've got a great expert for you, in this area. They're going to pay attention, right? But you don't know if it's a legit person. And one of the things in my world, in the podcast business, is I get hit up. It's not PR, but it's the same thing. It's, people hit me up and say, I've got a great guest for you. This person that owned a banana stand in Kiwanis, England, and they grew it to sell 5,000 bananas a day. It's like, what does that got to do with me? They have no concept of what's doing it. And the ones that come on my show are one of two categories. They're either people who have been guests who have been recommended by somebody else, right? So in other words, some guests like you being on this show, you recommend me, hey, Brian, you want to talk PR in your podcast? Here's a person I think would be awesome about social media and PR because we know each other. The other one is somebody that, like you said, follows you. And, they listen and they comment and they follow you on social media and Facebook, and they're engaging with you. There's a reason why you're doing something. They're not just following you and then hit you up with a pitch. They're following you and engaging and putting good comments in and talking about things and not being, mean or contradictory and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
So talk about the difference between, the old style of PR and the new style of PR, and how do you get attention for those companies?
Sure. The old style, the easiest way for me to explain it was ice cold. Yeah, it was impossible to know all of these people without a way to actually get to know them, get to know their likes, their tastes, and things.
Mm-hmm.
So you're sending things out ice cold, and it's like a cold call.
Hey, Bob, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. And the only reason
Sure.
I'm going to do that is because this occasionally happens and my computer froze. So I'm going to let you're set up on the screen, chat away. I want you to do maybe a 3 or 4 minute answer, and I'll be right back. So keep going.
Sounds good.
Thank you, sir. So talk about it.
Yep. So, it's was a cold call case. We're talking in the 80s and earlier, and late 80s, early 90s. And then along came this really cool thing called technology and social media and things like that. So sitting home or in my office, I could then see, through social media channels, reporters, assignment editors, names that I had, but didn't have any relationship with, didn't know their likes or tastes. And then all of a sudden they're out on social media. They enjoy water skiing. Who would think, or they enjoy, animals, dogs, cats, whatever. And they're very involved with maybe rescuing dogs or cats and different animals. And, so you start to see their passions. And then when you communicate, you don't just say, oh, I see you like, animal rescue. You then look for your clients that are involved with that, that they either donate or work, in that space, support it in some way. And then you reach out and say, hey, I've got this storyline that might be of interest to you. And they always have to, go through producers and, assignment editors and things like that. But it gives you a little bit of an edge. So that's what's so distinctly different over the years. Before it was totally cold. Now through social media channels and easier communications, easier comms, cellular phones, and all of those things. Instagram and Facebook. It's so easy to learn more about people and their interests, and then approach it, from there. So that's probably one of the biggest changes. And then just the technology in and of itself. Early on with RAS, one of our biggest products and services to our clients were newsletters, internal communications. We had for so many clients. We were doing at one point, I think about 35, maybe 40 different newsletters a month for clients. Some had divisions or, zone offices that had, companies that had 12 and 14 of those. And so you do those, and then another client has maybe 8 or 10. So all of a sudden you're doing 35, 40 newsletters a month. Interestingly, we saw that trend with desktop publishing, with the advent of the Mac in '84, because we go back to, those days. And so, you jump on that, and you have to really watch for the trends that are breaking. I remember I had a client call me while I was driving on the New Jersey Turnpike, and the client said, hey, do you have a digital camera? And I'm like, I sure do. Why? Well, we've got this project and it's tomorrow and we need to do quick turn and all that. Hung up my car phone because I had one of those hardwired antique car phones. And the next thing you know, one of my employees sitting next to me said, you don't have a digital camera? I said, we do now. And I made a turn and I pulled into like a Bury and Homer or a Best Buy, I forget what it was. And I bought my first digital camera. And the next day I was making money. You have to be nimble. And so, the advent of digital photography was another massive change, so that you can, I used to take 20 and 30 rolls of film from construction projects. We have a huge construction client, heavy highway, bridges and all that. And all of that construction needs to be matter of record photographed. And so we would take 25, 30 rolls of film every other day and get that developed. And it was like, back in the day, $15, $16, whatever it was. And you had to wait for it 2 or 3 days. Sometimes you could get it processed overnight, but it was outrageously. So now you take it, you've got it. And so, that just really led to changes, not only in time, but in the ability to do things you could never do in the past. So, there's some of the big changes that, we've seen over the years.
Yeah, and what's amazing about it too is I remember getting film developed. I mean, we did kind of the same thing. I worked in the not in photography, but video business. So we take
Mhm.
stills and stuff like that, and basically go out and grab location shots, and you'd bring it in, you'd get it developed, you get it overnight, so you get it in the morning, you pick it up. And one time I went and I should have had these shots of like all these telephone offices that I was working on this AT&T project, and I ended up with pictures of the Pope. It's like you never know what you're going to get. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
well, hey, I didn't get what I needed, but I got pictures of, Francis
yeah,
and Pope Francis.
yeah,
It's just crazy. But, now, I mean, it is truly the, it's almost like, when do you need it yesterday world? Everybody's gotten
yeah,
into this. And what they don't understand is that, even though you can get things instantly, there are certain things that still take time. It
yep,
takes time to develop those relationships. It takes time to get somebody to, call and verify. I mean, it's a true journalist. The one thing about journalists is, what is it? Something once, ask once, verify twice, or something like
yep.
that. I mean,
Hmm.
a good journalist does that. And I think the other thing that really has a huge impact, which we haven't talked about yet, is fake news. You know, I
Yep.
mean, it's like you can go out there and say, and again, I don't want to go in negative in the COVID train, but you know, we've got this therapy that will solve things. And I mean, there's been so many different examples of PR and advertising and people going on shows that were saying, hey, we've got this 3-minute blood test, we've got this, we've got that, and all these things are basically just priming the pump with the hope that the stuff would work. So I think
Right.
there's a big difference between, you know, PR in a sense that is truly been vetted, verified, and all that other stuff, and some people that treat PR as like, pre-advertising kind of stuff to see what the
Sure.
market will do. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges, not for PR folks, but for journalists, is what they're faced with is interesting. And you have to recognize this. They're faced with a 24-hour news cycle, filling that with news. And also the big differentiator from in the past is being first. That's why breaking news just, doesn't get it right a lot. I think generally journalists really do a good job and work hard at getting the facts right.
Mm-hmm.
But as we've seen over the past few years, 6 months later, through a crisis, and then all the facts come out, and you go, wow, they really missed the mark on A, B, or C.
Right.
And part of that's just getting out there in front. And there's so many pressures there, financial pressures, basically. So recognizing that and trying to develop high quality, honest, intellectual material for your clients. And I've turned down a lot of work over the years because there's that pressure of we want the news. And I won't say, I've never had a client ask me to lie for them, but a few over the years, and it's many years, have kind of pushed that boundary. Like, nah, I'm not comfortable with that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because there's the ethical side, but there's also the legal side. If
Right.
you make claims in PR for a client, we have to vet our client's work before we'll even put it out there in many cases, especially anything related to, medicines like pharmaceuticals, safety and stuff. You start touting product X and saying it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and it's a big flop, you're wide open, to malpractice lawsuits, So you have to really be careful in pushing breaking news and making sure we get it right. But it helps the journalist on that,
Right.
the other side, the receiving side. It really helps them get it right. And when you do that and do it well, you then become a go-to source.
Exactly.
Because, you've made their job easier. And again, recognizing, the pressures on that side of the business.
Mm-hmm.
Newsrooms, I don't know, 20 so years ago, used to be solely independent with all the major networks and all. And then because of money, they become became absorbed into the entertainment divisions of
Right.
NBC, ABC. So then, the budget dollars and ratings became equally important to the news in and of itself.
Right.
And that was a dramatic change over the years, So,
Well, and we got to go back to, where you got to look at where it started. And I mean, PR, advertising, news, were kind of all of this intertwined thing. They were like three, they were a hydra. They were, three heads of the same monster.
Sure. Yeah.
Because you had news, and advertising drove the news because it paid for everybody's salaries, but then PR was the source of the news. And in the internet age, the three of those have started to blend. It's like some PR is advertising, some PR is news, some news is advertising. It's really hard to tell what's what anymore. I mean, a true journalist is different than a blogger. But there are certain blogs that are newsworthy, because they get scoops, but they don't have the same level of expertise. They don't have the same vetting philosophies. They don't have the same, if they get it wrong, they could turn around and say, well, it's a blog. It's not news. It's like, so they can do certain things. And some people take blogs as news. I mean, it becomes this big mishmash of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, you had said something interesting. This hydra kind of came together. But then I think what happened is sort of in the sense of a Big Bang theory. They not only came together, but then they exploded. They went in different directions, a ricochet principle, whatever. Because in fact, everyone in their minds became a journalist. No training, no subscribing to ethics and things like that. And they're opinionators in my book. And everybody has one. Are they all right? No,
Right.
There was that collision. At first it was like, oh, this is good. We collaborate, we work. But then all of a sudden it just kind of blew up in my mind because social media became so powerful through instantaneous abilities. People were posting pictures of that horrific building collapse 20 minutes before the news even picked up on it. It's just people on site, passers-by, and boom, boom, boom. And a lot of the newsrooms found out about it through their social feeds, Twitter and things like that. And they're like, wow, get on it. So, then when people voice, opinions, you're opened up to literally millions of opinions.
Yeah.
And, that can get ugly, or it can be fun, so there's just so many changes, that you have to, take into the mix.
Well, and back to, I think one of the key things that, we're in the age, you bring up a really good point. We're in the age of do-it-yourself everything. It's like do-it-yourself PR. Go to PR Web, just write a press release and put it out there and send it to everybody. And, you can even get micro-targeted. I was listening to this masterclass. I mean, I love masterclass because you're listening to experts in particular fields, but you can see the parallels. And one of the ones that I listened to was on running a political campaign. And you don't even think about this. In a sense that minute you think politics, I mean, in my world, there are three things you never talk about on social media. One is politics, one religion, the other one's sex. And it's not sex in the act, it's sex versus men versus women. Because you're going to tick off 50% of your audience with any of those. But one of the things that, if you sit down and listen to this masterclass on politics, the way they frame it is, and this is what I came away from it is basically what you're doing is you're setting up a 2-year small business. You need all the things that small businesses have. You have, advertising, finance, payroll, locations, computers, internet, print. You need a copier. You need, all the things that a business do, but you're just setting up a shop for 2 years. And the goal is to get somebody elected, so that's basically what it is doing this kind of, and essentially in PR, it's this, I don't think it's essentially the same thing, but there are parallels to that in the fact that when you get a product or you get a client, there's a life cycle to it, right? Can you talk through the life cycle of doing something like that?
Sure. Those, in the early days, in the 80s, say, those life cycles were relatively evergreen, 3 months, 6 months, even a year, where something would really be relevant and newsworthy. Now, if I understand your question right, it's like in nanoseconds.
Right.
Simply because of the plethora of information that's out there and being pushed and exchanged.
And it goes away just as fast too, right? So that means you have to keep priming that pump,
Yep, it goes quickly, and that's a good term. Yeah, you have to keep priming the pump and building and keeping that interest. Right now, one of our clients is a cooperative down in Georgia, based in Georgia, Federation of Southern Cooperatives. It's a Black-owned cooperative that has a mission of saving Black-owned farmer land. So Land Assistance Fund is part of what they do. And, with the Farm Bill, and now the lawsuit against the Farm Bill saying it's a racist Farm Bill, and on and on and on. Trevor Noah had a great program on last week talking about why it isn't racist, because people don't know the history, and our government's lawsuits say. So the point being, that news cycle, that's big news right now, but it'll go away in a flash if you don't keep priming that pump. So, we immediately got back to the Trevor Noah show with, it's much bigger than Black farmers. That bill represents farmers of color, Latino, on and on, not just Black farmers. And that discrimination that took place goes years. So then it becomes not just the news, it's priming that pump with the background and the details and the stories that keep that in the forefront of people's minds, because that lawsuit is like, this is discriminatory, it's racist, and it has to go. Right. And when you look at the details and the history of it, and how our government settled in lawsuits, in wrongdoing, said in lending, it was all about loans and not giving Black farmers and farmers of all colors loans. And so that's the bigger part of the story. It's not that Blacks were discriminated; it was farmers of color, across the band, and the government settled to the tune of billions. Right. And so this isn't reparations, the issue, but the media doesn't have time to do that digging. So we as PR people, that's the whole point. We need to, I love that term, prime the pump. We have to keep it going, or we're sucking air. Right. And then, sucking air is dead air time. It's non-news. And so that's the key in PR, today, with all the things they're hit with, they're already looking at the next big story. So keeping stories relevant and that history now of what happened, so people have a better understanding of why that bill's not racist.
Right. So I want to make 2 points based on what you said. The first one kind of builds upon something we've already talked about, and the second one kind of takes us down a different avenue. And can you believe that we're already about, we got about 20 minutes left. Wow. Yeah, it's how fast this goes, because there's so much great stuff we could talk about. But the first point that I want to get across is, okay, so in this do-it-yourself world, there is a reason why you exist and why I exist. Okay. Anybody can do social media. Anybody can do marketing. Anybody can do those things. But the one thing that people run into is in this do-it-yourself world is, do you have the experience, the sustainability, and the strategy to actually make it as effective as possible? Because you, as a business owner, you don't have time to be a social media person, and you don't have time to be a PR person, and you don't have time to be an advertising person, and you don't have time to be a marketing person or a salesperson. You've got a job. And so by trying to do it yourself, what you're doing is you're pulling yourself away from what makes your business tick to try to save money on some stuff. So there's always there's cost of doing business that you got to say, if I spend $1, will I make 5? Or am I going to spend $1 and lose 3? By not spending $1, can I lose 10? It's like, you've got to sit down and kind of understand the reason why people still need to hire professionals. Exactly. Just because everything is changing that fast even makes it more important. Now we go to point 2, which is on that line. And point 2 is, we don't live in a news cycle world anymore. We live in a headline world. When you look at social media and what gets people's ire, what gets people's attention is not the content of what's below, it's the headline and how it's written. And I'll give you a
Bingo.
perfect example of that now is I got an immense amount of great attention on a blog post that I did. And what I called it is why you want to be a member of the cancel culture. And what the content was about, what was funny about it is that it was about canceling subscriptions that you don't ever use anymore. That's all it was about. It's like go into all your subscriptions on your credit card and cancel these things and take that money and apply it towards something that's going to help you grow yourself or your business. That's all it was. That was the whole concept. But I could take the word cancel culture and garner so much attention from it, you know, and that's the key. So how do we deal with this? You know, as a PR person, how do you stick out in this headline only world? Because all they are there to do is to raise people's blood pressure to get their attention, right?
Exactly. And that's tricky because you don't want to be the clickbait PR firm.
Right.
You know, that's dangerous because, you know, you come up with something that's, like you said, the cancel culture, you're immediately thinking about, you know, politics and all of those things. And you're talking about canceling subscriptions, right?
Right.
So there's two sides to those things. So you have to really strike a balance and you have to be careful. And, you know, from a business perspective, you know, speaking not of politics, but in general, you know, we're a relatively still fractured, split nation. It's about 50-50, 52-48, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's a fine line. You know, when you represent a broad range of clients, striking that balance, you know, it's really a challenge. So when you develop, to your question, you know, these sensational headlines, you really have to be careful because there is backlash generally on the back end when it's like getting drawn in by clickbait and then you go and you get ticked off like they just sucked me in and has nothing to do with it. So those headlines are dangerous, you know. They do get, you know, reads and clicks and they do create buzz, but you have to be careful and we caution our clients against, you know, doing that. It's good maybe for a quick bang, but you know, if there's no substance, if it's not accurate or it's not what you make people think it is, on the backside, you're in trouble. It's all about credibility. Yeah.
Well, and it is about credibility. And in our world, I mean, you know, we live, Twitter is one, you know, Twitter, you got 240 characters to do something. Google ads, you know, the whole advertising, this online advertising side of things is all based on, you know, 90 characters or 130 characters. I mean, that's all you get. You don't get a lot of space to be able to do things. And, you know, so there's even software programs you could buy to write better headlines that, you know, add these things and they rate them and rank them based on how they're going to do. But the key thing is I think it boils down to is knowing who your audience is, knowing what emotionally drives them. And, you know, can you create, I like to think it more as in rather than creating shock and awe is creating empathy is, you know, that's almost the antithesis of what everybody else is doing. So that's essentially what I'm saying is you can stand out by doing something that makes people feel good almost more than by shocking the heck out of them. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. And for any PR, you know, folks out there listening to this, you know, podcast, I'll share something that to me, it's breaking and it's something that we'll be talking about in a webinar with our network that Susan and I own. And it's ESG, you know, it's environmental, social, and governance, which is like a whole different level when you look at sustainability and things of those nature. ESG is sort of the whole package. And it's companies doing good, but for the right reasons, you know, creating profit for sustainability, but doing it the right way, environmentally, socially, and through their own governance. And that's a big emerging issue for PR firms. So any folks that are listening to me about ESG, look it up. There are some great folks. You've got Noah Miller out there. That is an absolute expert on ESG, consults with so many companies. I'll actually be partnering with Noah on a project because I've recognized through our conversations, Noah and I, the importance of it. It's a rapid change to what we do. And so, you know, companies today no matter what they do, they're scrutinized by their customers, but equally important, investors, and people want a stake in that business, even if they're just buying something or thinking about buying something. So from a PR standpoint, that's critical nowadays, and it's emerging, and it's coming up rapidly. So if I could impart any wisdom on young PR folks that are looking at either breaking into it or working for a small agency that's new and stuff, get into that, learn about it, and understand ESG, and you'll be the better for it. In turn, your company or your clients will be better for it, and it'll be a better world.
Right.
Are you familiar by any chance with B Corps?
No. I know S Corps. I don't know B Corps.
B Corps is, in a simplistic way, it's a third-party validation of who you as a business, who you are on all of those types of things. And you'll see companies are B Corp certified, and you go through a lengthy process, and an amazing program, not plugging them as a business, but in doing business. If you subscribe to what they do, your public relations will be so much easier, because everybody's a stakeholder now. That was different. The only stakeholders when I was younger and just breaking into this business, the only stakeholders in a company, at least recognized stakeholders, were those who had a financial investment in the company. Now everybody's a stakeholder in, Starbucks or whatever, brand is out there, by the sheer virtue of interest. Because if you have a problem with their governance, their social, their environment, you might not even be a customer, but then what happens? If you have an issue with it, you tell your friends, and you know how that hurts, or helps.
Right.
So many changes coming, and it's really, really cool time to be in the profession. And, I just, again, feel like an old dog that learns new tricks every day.
Well, and you bring up a really good point, and I think this is, we've got about 10 minutes left, and I think I want to go down this road with it. And so you and me both are of the age that we actually have our card. You have this, I'm a card carrier. I'm not talking about AARP. It's the Get Off My Lawn card. You can actually say that now legitimately because you're of that age. But I think one of the things that, and I am too, so, but one of the things I think that's important about that is companies. I mean, you bring up this B Corp thing, which is similar to what manufacturers and other companies go through with ISO 9000. It's basically a certification saying, you're the real deal. But more importantly, in this current environment, and this is why I think PR and advertising and the things that we do, I think PR is a strategy that can drive branding, that can drive, it's not just you create the strategy and the brand, you let PR carry it forward. A lot of times PR has to be the thing that drives the brand and the strategy. And the reason I say that is because in the current work environment, we have two things going on. We have people who are changing jobs like mad. They're changing every 3 years because they don't feel valued. The second thing is they want to feel like I've got some millennial kids, and they want to feel like they're part of change. They want to be part of a company that actually does good. So they want to feel like what they're doing for their work has value to the world. It's not just a job to buy a house, to retire and send your kids to college. Their lifestyle, their values are different than ours. And so from a PR standpoint, I think it's really important, and a lot of brands need to consider the concept of how they look in the marketplace. Like Tom Shoes is a great example. Bombas socks, those kind of things. Tom Shoes donates shoes. Bombas socks donates socks. And there's microloan companies out there that are giving loans to people in Africa, in very desolate places. And these microloans are $150 so they can buy a cow or a goat or something like that. Exactly. There is companies out there that are creating solar panels so kids can go to school in impoverished countries, because they have no way of powering internet or getting anything like that, or they don't have any electricity. And in order for them to go to school, they need internet and a laptop to be able to do that, because they don't have physical schools because of whatever. So there's so much social and world vision in what we do now. It's not just this we're no longer dealing with the little hometown company, right?
Yep. Yeah. And for me, and my line of thought is, believe it or not, in my youth, I was a phenomenal long distance runner, 423 miler.
Wow.
There's two of me now. I'm an older man. As much as I'd like to run a 423 mile, that's never going to happen again in my lifetime. So the changes that have taken place, I embrace them. But just like I can't run that 423 mile, I surround myself with young people because they get it. They get it, in a different way than I do. They were born and brought up through it, and I wasn't. So surrounding yourself with young talent is critical, in our business, I think, because of the changes. And you can learn new things and stuff, and you can be passionate about them. But again, I can tell somebody how to run that mile. I can't do it anymore. And so, I like to surround myself with young, talented people that can do it quick and do it right. And that's another big thing that I think as you grow and near twilight times, you can sustain things for many more years beyond, by learning from those folks, but also teaching them, the important aspects of things, in terms of business and relationships. So, the things, they're changing all the time and rapid, and, social media has made it both good and bad, with the changes, because, you're back in the day, I was one of the first people in my whole business circle, to have a car phone. And people would call me like, oh, it's late as 7 o'clock at night sometimes, and if I was in my car, I'd answer and stuff. Now, there's no boundaries. Most of my clients, if not all, are very respectful of personal space, for sure. But man, people can get you anytime, anywhere. You're on vacay. That's been a big challenge. So, having some personal space and time, is still important, striking that balance. But man, that can be vicious too. When is time off?
Well, and that's the key thing is, like, it's hard. You have to set your own boundaries, and you have to let people know where those boundaries are. And but it's true. We are accessible 24/7. I mean, and you have to decide whether you want to pick it up or not, or whether you want to wait till the next day to, if I get a call at 8 o'clock on a Sunday night, generally speaking, it goes to voicemail or text, and it sits there till Monday morning. It's just, you make those choices. I think, kind of bringing us back to, where we started was, normal is just a setting on the dryer. Think about how, life before the car, was all horse-drawn carriages. Life before the Industrial Revolution was all agriculture. Life before the internet was all one-to-one relationships. But the one thing that has never changed over the course of time is you have to continue to learn. You have to continue to rely on other human beings to get things done. And relationships are really the currency of business, and they will always be that. So absolutely. With that being said, tell everybody a little bit more about, how they can get a hold of you. I'll put up your, we got about 2 minutes left, so I want to make sure I put up your website address again, and talk about that real quick.
Yeah. So, we're based just outside Philadelphia in South Jersey. I was born and raised here, and love this whole area and region. So, our website kind of reflects that, our Philly roots, and, we do work internationally. Pretty accessible. All my contact information is on the website. If I'm not tied up, I generally answer calls, leave a message. I'll look at it. If it's just some bizarre thing, I probably won't call you back, but if it makes business sense or I can help, reach out. And, so yeah, we're still, always looking for work. I don't see the end game yet. My wife still wants to work a few more years, and so do I. So, my son-in-law pretty much runs RAS Associates, but I keep my hand in it. And I spend a good deal of time working the business of our network, USPR network, just, because it's a collaborative, it's a collection of amazing agencies, from around the world. And so that keeps me pretty busy. And I just enjoy the daylights out of this. If I don't do things I don't enjoy, and I have not run out of the joy of PR, and because it's all about relationships. And my PR roots brought me to you, so to speak. And that kind of relationship with so many other professionals, and it's just very cool. Yeah.
It is. It's a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun getting to know you up front. I'm so glad you made it today, man. Can you believe this hour went by so fast? I mean, it's amazing,
it just flew. And I'm so honored to be on here. I know you've had some amazing guests, and now I feel part of that fraternity.
Well, you are. There's a reason why I invited you, because you're amazing, and you have, a lot of experience and a lot of understanding of this. And I hopefully everybody watching this, live or on the replays got something out of it. So, cool. Bob, I'm gonna call it a day. I'm gonna, get us out with the Bacon and Coffee logo, man. I want to thank you very much. Everybody, connect with Bob. If you need a connection to him, just send me an email or hit me up on Facebook. Send me smoke signals. I'll make the connection for you. So everybody, have a great one. Thanks for coming to Bacon and Coffee. We'll see you next week. All right.
Thank you, sir.